was one not so bad right off the bat. I think this is a good get your toe in the pool type of video. The title of this video is Boris Johnson in plea to stop China, quote, Cold War as he touches down at NATO summit. And we're actually, for the sake of memes, let's start this video at the 420 mark.
420, here we go.
I didn't mean for it to happen that way. It just happened, okay?
Oh, man.
Very much, sir.
You know, I've had hair like Boris Johnson in the past, so I can respect it.
He doesn't even, when he was walking to the stage, the wind was blowing it around. He like tried to pat it down, and then he just gave up. He was like, whatever.
Working on today. Thank you.
Yeah, no, StreamYard's not a happy camper.
Oh, we're gonna drag StreamYard's kicking and screaming through the rest of the show.
Absolutely. Okay. Let's
At least you can't blame it on the Wyoming internet this time.
That's right.
Damn it, the one scapegoat.
Thank you all very much, sir. I think that China is, as I've said many times, a gigantic fact in our lives and a new strategic consideration for NATO, which after all has spent so much of its time in the last 72 years thinking about the Soviet Union, then of course the former Soviet Union, the various security threats posed from that area. But I think when it comes to China, you've got to, I don't think anybody around the table today wants to descend into a new Cold War with China.
Okay, we're already stopping it. We're already stopping it. The Cold War happened whether we wanted it or not. It's already underway. Like, are we supposed to believe here that the Communist Party in Beijing, they're totally cool with the West, they're totally cool with not trying to take over Eurasia and eventually the world, and it was just the pesky people in the West, like Trudeau, that wanted a Cold War, and Biden that wanted a Cold War? Is that what we're supposed to believe? Because that doesn't really seem to be what's going on. It seems to be one-sided aggression, one-sided manipulation, one-sided screwing over everybody else coming from communist China.
Yeah, and you can just look at Taiwan for that. I mean, China just flies military planes right over Taiwan, and Taiwan, of course, has to fend them off, costing them a bunch of money. Then you look at the South China Sea. Like, China is a big aggressor in their region.
Yeah,
it's just a border dispute, bro. Just a border dispute.
And here's the thing: just the other day, they flew nuclear-capable bombers into the Taiwanese airspace, and yet that's not that provocative. But when I suggest, and I've made videos in the past calling for the United States to station nuclear weapons in Taiwan to guarantee Taiwanese sovereignty, people have told me that would spark a Cuban Missile Crisis and that could trigger a nuclear war. But they get to fly nuclear-capable aircraft into Taiwanese airspace, and that's just their sphere of influence, bro. That's basically what the narrative is at this point. But I'm the warmonger. I'm the guy who wants to start World War III. So
always that double standard, isn't there? No, it's just absurd. This is the kind of rhetoric that we've been seeing from pretty much the bulk of the Western leaders. It's this unwillingness, because obviously when it comes to NATO, yeah, he's right to say that there's this focus on Russia, but and it's not to take away from that, but there needs to be some multitasking happening here. I know that's kind of spooky too. That almost became a meme in recent times. You can't multitask. You can't focus on more than one thing. You need to direct all your efforts toward one problem, tunnel vision. No, Russia is not the only aggressor in the world, amazingly enough. China is an enormous aggressor. I'm tired I'm tired of them being referred to as a competitor. I'm tired of them not being taken seriously as a nuclear threat. That is all garbage. Absolute garbage.
Yes, I would agree with that, but we can continue with the video.
I don't think that's where people are, but I think people see, they see challenges. They see things that we have to manage together, but they also see opportunities. And I think that what we need to do is do it together. It's a very, very successful alliance, as I never tire of telling you. It's the most successful military alliance in history. It's done a very good job of protecting the people of this continent, and it's going to continue to do so.
There you go. So I believe that's all I have to say about China. But again, that's kind of the mood at the moment around that issue, and it's a bit depressing, to say the least.
Yeah,
So,
and you look at kind of like the Overton window kind of shifting, because normally like new Cold War in China is something you hear of these fringe leftist groups like the Gray Zone. But now you got a foreign leader in the UK, probably one of the US's best allies, suggesting that there's a Cold War between us and China. Like, this kind of thing needs to be fought, like China needs to be fronted, but we don't necessarily have to get into Cold War politics where we go into Vietnam again. We just got to set up deterrence there so China doesn't expand their empire, especially in Taiwan and the South China Sea.
that's imperialism.
Yeah, no, I think the Cold War is already underway. Like, I mean, again, the point about a Cold War is that it's not a hot conflict. It's a conflict waged by other means, economic espionage, military espionage, proxy wars in cases like you alluded to the Vietnam, for example. But it doesn't necessarily have to include proxy wars. There hasn't been a proxy war between Communist China and the West yet. It is possible to win this without actually having a proxy war, I believe, but it doesn't mean that we're not in a state of Cold War tension, as I see it. I think calling it a Cold War is good. I think that people need to wake up to the threat that's there. I think a lot of people intuitively know that they've been screwed over by China, that they got the short end of the deal with them, and it wouldn't be that difficult to get people on board with referring to it as a Cold War. I could see that being a politically popular stance because everybody already knows that they've basically screwed us over economically, and a bunch of corporatists and hacky politicians were happy to abet that process. So, but what do you guys think about that?
Well, China does attack us pretty much on a daily basis with cyber attacks. China,
Yes.
Russia, you know, they send these cyber attacks trying to get viruses, trying to get worms, trying to get malware into our system to faulty some of the defenses. And some of that's actually really scary, especially when you look at what the United States and Israel was able to do to the nuclear reactors in Iran. If they can get something capable to the United States, it can turn off pipelines, it can turn off any manufacturing. Like, there's a lot of risk for some of these cyber attacks that are going on, and it has to be met with some sort of deterrent so you don't try these sort of things.
Yeah, I think deterrence is key. It's the concept of peace through strength, right? And so before we move on to the next video, I want to ask you guys here, because we got Jaeger here. It's normally just me and Reese, but we got Jaeger here as well. And Jaeger follows a lot of world politics pretty closely. What do you guys both think of the idea of the West, America, even say the UK, if they wanted to be proactive, stationing a few nuclear weapons, even tactical nuclear weapons on Taiwan? Do you think that that would basically be another Cuban Missile Crisis, or do you think that that would guarantee Taiwanese sovereignty and actually make that area more stable?
And I think, go ahead, Reese. I'll let you go first.
No, well,
Oh no, we can let Jaeger go. Jaeger's
yeah, no.
go.
You're the guest. The guest, my friend. Go ahead.
Okay, I think at some point we are going to have to, whether it's going to be now or whether it's going to be a couple of years in the future. And the reason being is China's doing these like you said, the nuclear bomber, sending it over there. But China's goal is to eventually take and overcome Taiwan. So putting a deterrent there will stop them from some of their actions. And so I think it would be a good thing for Taiwan's sovereignty. but also to put kind of an end to what China's already doing to Taiwan, where they're trying to bleed them out of money to constantly send out their air force to take care of these Chinese threats that keep coming into their airspace.
Good answer.
Yeah,
I
what do
think,
you say, Reed?
I feel like I've talked about it before, but I'm not remembering. I do support that. But again, the timing is key here too. This is a good point to do it. I think that the comparison to the Cuban Missile Crisis is ridiculous, hyperbolic, and because that was a case when you had nuclear weapons stationed up against the American frontier. Very different situation, very different nuclear capabilities. America during the height of the Cold War versus China right now. Yeah, they have a more sizable arsenal than North Korea, but it's not that. It's not like that. And I truly don't believe that they would risk a nuclear confrontation over a strip of land like Taiwan now. Let's go one step further. Let's put Taiwan in NATO. Let's really spook people.
Yeah, well, that raises a question. What do you guys think about another version of NATO that's centered around the Asia Pacific? Or do you think that NATO should just be enlarged and you just change the name from North Atlantic Treaty Organization to say like Western Treaty Organization or something?
I think you just call it NATO and just add them in, because there's many countries in NATO that don't do jack. So like Liechtenstein, kind of these smaller countries in Central Europe, you know what, just add them into NATO, because Russia could still technically be a threat there in the Pacific Ocean, because they do touch the Pacific Ocean. So just add them in to NATO as it's existing, because they may actually get up to that 2% threshold as well.
Yeah. Well, then that's the thing. I believe Taiwan's higher than your typical NATO country. I'm just going to check that right now. Taiwan military
I'd imagine so.
because they have a pretty sizable economy, but their military budget is
No, they're lax, man. They're just sitting on their thumbs over there. They don't care.
Yeah, and the other country with China is India, that we should develop kind of more relations, because India does not like China, and develop more relations, because I know they had the border skirmish last year. So developing those relations would be a great thing with India in defense against China.
Mm-hmm. Look at us, spreading friendship all across the globe.
I mean, you could look at the countries. You could look at Taiwan. You could look at Japan, South Korea. We do have decent relation with Indonesia as well. Like, we could have a whole block there in Asia around China.
Yeah, so Taiwan's military expenditure is actually only $13 billion, and their economy is $682 billion. So it's around 2%. It's actually lower than I had thought, but it is what it is. So
that could be incentivized.
Yeah. I would have figured they'd be spending a considerable amount more. South Korea spends a decent amount more, but yeah. Anyway, that's that. So
I just wanted to point out before we move on that this warhawk imperialist Jaeger de Pedo suggested that China should be surrounded with military bases on all sides. That's aggression, man. It's really aggressive. I don't think they'll like that.
Doesn't matter what they like or not. What matters is the sovereignty of these other nations, and like they're definitely scared of China.
China owns the world, man. That's their border dispute. They keep stretching back the borders. Very malleable borders.
We've got a guy that we're probably going to take a look at later in the show that would refer to Jaeger as a neocon ghoul for saying that.
That's interesting.
Actually,
because I'm not even a neocon, so that's interesting.
Well, now you are. Welcome to the club, buddy.
That's what they all say. Like that's what Tulsi said. That's what Bernie said, right?
The neocons and neolibs.
Because they're the same thing.
They always agree. They just can't. You can't separate them, man. It's like Salt and pepper. Neocons and neolibs. Anyway, this is actually a good follow-up. Now that we just watched Bojo, let's watch the man who could have been the Prime Minister of the UK. This is a clip of